Welcome to the Unconventional Path, entrepreneurship and innovation stories and ideas. Hi, I'm coming to you from the Capital Region campus of Clarkson University in Schenectady, New York. I'm Bela Musitz, a former three-time entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and now the David D. Ray Professor of Innovation and Entrepreneurship here at Clarkson University.
And from here in beautiful Münster, Germany, I'm Mike Wasserman, Professor of International Management at the Münster University of Applied Sciences. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoy our podcast. The two of us want to take the lessons that we've learned over the last 3 decades as entrepreneurs, investors, managers, and professors, and leverage our network of interesting friends, former students, business partners, and others we've met along the way in our life's journey to bring you interesting stories, ideas, and insights into innovation, entrepreneurship, and the people that take unconventional paths to find happiness at work and in life.
Before we get to today's episode, a quick thank you to our sponsors, Clarkson University
and the Münster University of Applied Sciences.
Hey, Mike, we got another listener question. Matthew writes, Dear Bela and Mike, I love your podcast. Could you please interview some successful business owners who have used data to drive their decision-making? What did they measure? How was it analyzed? What conclusions were drawn? And how did the analysis change how they do business? When did the data challenge conventional wisdom and thus provide the company with a competitive advantage? Thank you, Matthew. Hey, Matt, thanks for the great question. And Mike, you have some comments on that?
Yeah, Matt, thanks. Great question. So this is interesting, and I oftentimes like to think about the intersection of data analytics as a disruptive technology that's entered into the business context today with entrepreneurship and startups. How do these two mesh? Because typically startups have no internal data, right? It becomes interesting. They don't have a product yet. They don't have operations. They can't measure productivity. They have no employees. They can't measure customer satisfaction because there aren't any yet. So it's there is external data available. So you can look at demographics. You can look at data you can get from the Census Bureau or from different sources about things like weather or things like commodity prices, things like that. The issue there is that if you can get at that, other people can get at that. And as long as you're analyzing it in kind of traditional ways, it can't be a source of competitive advantage. So this becomes an interesting set of issues. What I recommend entrepreneurs do is that they have an analytics plan as they're kind of building their business, that they have a plan on what metrics they want, what data they want to collect internally from their own operations, from their suppliers, from their customers. And that data that they can control can definitely be a source of competitive advantage. I think that the first part of gaining a competitive advantage is A, getting the right data, and that's going to have some trial and error. B, it's going to be using the most appropriate analysis tools. And I think that that's really more about finding people that can help you. I mean, maybe an entrepreneur will have the skill set that they need to do analytics, but typically it's finding, either hiring somebody or bringing in an intern or having a consultant help you analyze the data that you get. And then really an important part that people forget is, how does your team use the results of that data analysis to make decisions? Are you being unbiased in your assessment? Are you considering alternative explanations? So Matthew, short question, but a long answer. And I think that we have some context between Bela and I in our network that we can bring in on some future episodes to address this question, both from the perspective of an entrepreneur in terms of what you're asking, but I also know a couple data scientists, and I think it'd be great to bring in their perspectives as well, maybe either on the same podcast or do 2 episodes in terms of how data analytics can help entrepreneurs. How was that for an answer, Bill?
Yeah, I think that's great, Mike. And I think we'll double down our efforts and see if we can get a couple of users of data here, entrepreneurs, and interview them on the show, and they can share how they do it in their business.
Okay, now let's get right to our interview with Keri O'Brian.
Today, I'm here with Keri O'Brian Whitral, who is one of the early employees at Darn Good Yarns. And if you recall, in one of our previous episodes, we sat down with Nichole Snow, who was the founder of Darn Good Yarns. And I thought it would be interesting to have a conversation with someone who's an early employee at a small organization, a small startup, and try to understand from their perspective what's attractive about being part of a small startup and how that part works as opposed to joining a large company. So Keri, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. So tell me a little bit about what your thinking was about deciding to join a startup.
Well, to be honest, at first I thought I'd always end up in corporate America, and I did test that a little bit, was there for a couple of years, and it just wasn't necessarily fulfilling a part of my destiny as I saw it. So I ventured on Craigslist one day and found what I thought was this like small little company, and I was like, there's no way they're gonna even hire me, pay me, like how can they afford to pay me? But as Nichole mentioned in her earlier podcast with you, like I always had someone in my life saying, you know, never leave any stone unturned, always go for every opportunity. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna email them. And when I got an interview, I was like, I'll go for the interview and see what happens. It can't hurt. If anything, I'll learn from the experience. I'll get practice interviewing so I can go on some other job interviews, really not having any expectations for it. I did my interview. Well, my first interview actually got canceled because at the time Nichole was pregnant and had broken her ribs. So I didn't know the backstory at the time. So I was like, oh, this isn't anything. And then went on and had my second interview, and I was pleasantly surprised. So, you know, my interest was sparked. So I said, okay, I'll take a second interview with them. And, you know, once I got in the environment and saw what was happening and what the day-to-day kind of was like, I was hooked. There was no way I wasn't not getting this job. So, yeah.
Great. So let's go back a little bit.
Sure.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up on Long Island.
Okay.
Parents, police officer and nurse. So I came from a very blue-collar family. You know, opening a business was never something anyone in my family had ever done, but it always was kind of a spark in me growing up. I had a job in high school, where I was a piano teacher. So I started out in 10th grade with 3 students. I'd charge $10 for a half hour, and every year I increased it about $3. And by the end of my senior year of high school, I had almost 15 students that I was teaching weekly half-hour piano lessons to. So that was kind of my cash flow. They used to, you know, purchase a car and, you know, do whatever else a high school senior does.
Yeah, so that gave you a little taste of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I had what I thought
business.
at the time was very sophisticated books.
Mm-hmm.
I'd, you know, check mark each week who paid me, who didn't pay me, who owed me.
Yes.
So it was definitely a fun experience for me.
Great. And where'd you go to school? What your
I graduated from Siena with a degree in biology.
Oh, okay.
And then I also have an MBA from St. Rose.
Oh, excellent. And then after college, what'd you do?
I joined Americorp for a year. I was a Vista.
Oh, wow.
Yep. It was a pretty fun experience,
Oh,
definitely.
what'd you do there?
So I was Americorp Vista, partnered with the Peter Young Foundation, which is a local nonprofit here in the Capital District. And I was kind of assigned to them to build their volunteer program. They didn't have one. They had this, you know, very large organization and didn't really have a way to connect with students and other volunteers to kind of complete tasks for them that the nonprofit didn't necessarily have the arms to reach and get done on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, wow.
And then I was fortunate enough, they hired me after the year, and I worked for them for an additional 2 years and actually developed their version of Meals on Wheels. So home-delivered meal programs for seniors in the Capital District.
Okay. And then was there other things in between that and Darn Good Yarns?
I was also, after working for the Father Peter Young Foundation, I was hired by Whole Foods Market to do marketing for their Albany location.
Oh, wow. Wow. So that's great. So a lot of, there's this pattern there of doing things that sort of are outreaching and very much engaging with other humans.
Correct.
As opposed to sitting into an office where, you know, you engage with technology and not with humans.
For sure. I'm definitely a hands-on learner. In all of those positions, I was able to be in the community that I was assigned to or working with, and it really, I think that's one of the best ways for me to develop a strategy going into something is to experience it firsthand and then build on my knowledge that I have with, and then bringing in other people and resources to kind of help grow it from there.
And how long have you been at Darn Good Yarns now?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. And so talk a little bit about that experience of, okay, I'm going to join this small little company, and did you worry about getting paid? I mean, were finances a big thing, or was it career development, or?
Well, Nichole will probably kill me for sharing this, but I remember, obviously finances were something that was important to me. I had a mortgage to pay, I had bills to pay, my dog, those were the important things at the time I was hired that I had to get taken care of, and then, still grow for, at the time, my retirement, which I could probably talk to you about later. But I remember my first interview, Nichole asked what I wanted to make, and I decided at that point I wasn't going to sell myself short, even though I thought this company, was this small thing. I said, well, I'm currently making X, and she goes, okay, I can pay you that. And I said, wow, all right. So I think that was nice to have that cleared early on, and then that kind of got my mind swirling, like what is really going on behind the scenes here. So it really opened my eyes, and so that wasn't necessarily a barrier for me going into this business.
Okay.
I think it was just fate aligned for me at that point, and it kind of just worked itself out.
And so how did you convince Nichole that you were the right person for this job, right? Because from her perspective, you're one of the very early employees, number 2 or number 3, something like that. So,
yeah.
How do you make that sale?
I think for myself, I had to show Nichole that I was a very dedicated person and a hardworking person, and I wasn't just going to let the ball drop on something, and I was going to follow things through the end. So in the early time, it was a lot of proving ground, like, okay, you're going to give me this project, this is how I'm going to attack it and complete it, and then following up, like, this is where we're at. And also, I think having that ability to be a risk taker and try new things. I think at first I was definitely timid to come to the table with new ideas, but I've learned how to morph that because I've seen that I'm in an environment where I can fail. And I think that's something early on, as long as we're taking those failures and then we're figuring out, like, how can we rework this? That has led to a lot of success for myself personally and for the business.
Right. So what are sort of your responsibilities here? What's a typical day in the life of a small company employee?
Oh, man. Well, every day is definitely different. I've had to recently learn to add a little bit more structure to my schedule and delegation as we're growing our team, because I'm definitely a person that likes to do things myself, so I'm growing and learning to do that. But a typical day here, I usually start my morning out with emails and then kind of attacking the day as it goes on. I've blocked out certain days to handle certain topics. There's things that every day need my touch point, like Facebook ads or our email news list. So, having that prioritized as like what needs a daily interaction versus a weekly versus a monthly. And then working with the rest of our marketing team and our ops team to kind of make sure all those different touch points are being met by one person or another.
Okay. So if I met you at a networking event,
Mm-hmm.
and I asked you, what do you do? What would you say?
Oh, man. I would say that I am an... What would I say? So I would say I handle digital marketing. I handle everything from the post you see on your Facebook news feed to the influencer who is working to show you our products, to that email you get in your inbox on a weekly basis from us.
Great. I understood that.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah. Right. Sometimes when I ask people that question, it was like, some are very easy. Well, I'm an engineer, or I'm a,
Yeah.
I'm
a marketing engineer.
Right.
Can we say that?
I drive a dump truck, or, I run a grocery store. But for other people, it's particularly in small companies where people do so many different things,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the responsibilities are not necessarily related to your title.
Right.
There is some relationship, but there's not necessarily a 100% correlation. So that's good. So what have been sort of the biggest challenges for you in working in a small company?
I don't think they're necessarily challenges. I think that there's a lot of different opportunities, and it's just fun to problem solve them and figure out how they work within the Darn Good Yarn framework. I think we like to see what other businesses are doing and see the challenges they're facing there and essentially Darn Good Yarnify it and bring it into our business and our model and how can we make this work for what we're trying to do. And it's kind of that troubleshooting that makes it exciting and really it pays off for us.
Yes, yes. And so you do a lot of the social marketing for the business. So how did you learn that? How did that skill evolve and develop?
It evolved here while I was at Darn Good Yarn, for sure. A lot of the skill sets I have now, 2.5 years later, I didn't have when I came into the position. So it involved a lot of research, a lot of Nichole saying, hey, check this out, doing demos with people, learning about different softwares and opportunities, and really kind of trying to figure out, okay, how can we use this within Darn Good Yarn's ecosystem and really build a revenue stream off of it. So it's kind of been organic in nature. If you were to meet me 3 years ago and ask me how to get a 3x on a Facebook ad, I would not know what the answer was.
Okay.
So it's a lot of on the site learning. But I think that's something for me that's personally been a trait of mine that I've embraced in my career path after college, during college, and I've learned how to really hone in on that and bring things to light.
And it's still a segment of the world that's changing rapidly.
Yeah, flexibility is definitely key. Your site's working one day and the other day you're like tapping your screen, is this thing on? So we always have to be quick on our feet, I think, and that's something else. Like we've learned, we have the luxury in a sense to be flexible. Like if, I know sales aren't going to be there one day, I know I have the power with our email list to send out an email to help drive some revenue or to maybe work on a different ad set in Facebook to reach a new audience.
So what's how do you think about the culture here at Darn Good Yarns and how has that evolved in the time that you've been here?
Sure. So when I think of the culture here, we're really, we definitely embrace the family atmosphere. We're a tight-knit team. There's a lot of openness with all of us. Everyone kind of knows what's going on in the work environment, but outside of it as well. I always like to use the example of Amanda, who's our ops manager. She was a bridesmaid in my wedding. Nichole and her family attended our wedding. Amanda also just bought a house across the street from me. So we have, I think, one of the awesome foundations is we are all great friends and outside of the organization, and we really lift each other up and empower one another both within and without of the business. And I think that's something that we like to emulate with everyone else as well. There's really that open line of communication that everyone kind of knows, like, as long as you're communicating it and getting it across, we're all there to help you problem solve and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, that's great. It's interesting that in my working experience, I've worked in some organizations where your personal life was totally separate from your work life, right? There was no mingling, if you will, of the two. And in other organizations, it was hard to see the difference between those two.
Right.
So clearly the family atmosphere here is an important element of the culture.
I think so. And I think it's what drives people to want to succeed in the company as well. They see how, no pun intended, tight-knit we are, and they want to be a part of that.
So what advice would you give others who are contemplating, maybe they're graduating from college shortly, or they have graduated and they're working at a large company and they're thinking about, gee, maybe I'd like to try a small organizations. What sort of words of wisdom can you share with them?
Sure. I think that the first thing they have to do is, make sure it's the right decision for them. Are they willing to change their mindset on things? Because how things work in corporate world are not how they work in a small business. One of the transitions I had to make was in a corporate structure, things had to go through a lot of approval processes. Here at Darn Good Yarn, I am the approval process. So making that switch and having the confidence in yourself to know that you have that ability, I think is something, it's hard to learn. It can be learned, but it's just making sure that you're confident in your own ability and you can, steer that ship in whichever direction it's going to take. And then the financial side too. I was fortunate enough to find Darn Good Yarn, and financially they were able to meet my needs. I know other people that aren't. So, some other small businesses might not be able to meet that, but you can always, work part-time or contract with them, other things like that to get your foot in the door. Because I think it's always there might not be necessarily a full-time position for you somewhere, but getting your foot in the door is, I think, just a great way in. And then when you're ready to make that transition, you kind of have a little bit of a bridge into it.
Yeah, so one theme that is pretty consistent from what my conversation with Nichole was and with you is that this notion of flexibility and that life is going to be different and changing all the time, and one's ability to cope with that is really important in a small company.
For sure. I think, the flexibility, of trying new products and new things is one thing, but then also the flexibility within your own lifestyle, I think is going to be important as well. Because in a small business, sometimes, luckily here, we don't really have it, but sometimes maybe the site breaks down at 10 o'clock at night and you are, working to fix things there, or, something pops up on a weekend and you need to all hands on deck. So I think just having that flexibility as well, it translates well into the work life, into your working ethic.
Yes, excellent. So before we wrap this up, are there any other points that you'd like to make that I haven't asked you?
You stole my flexibility question that I was going to put there. Oh, I know one. I think one point I would like to make is it's okay to be uncomfortable. And I think that's something for me, I've had to grow and learn that it's okay to be uncomfortable in whatever situation it is, because as a person, I've grown from that experience and now I can take it and apply it to other things. So I think that was just a key trait that before I came into Darn Good Yarn, I didn't necessarily know how to be uncomfortable or know that it was okay to be uncomfortable in situations.
Yeah, excellent point. Do you contemplate starting your own business at some point in time?
Oh, for sure. I think Nichole definitely has empowered us to, have that. Nichole has empowered us to have that mindset. So it's not something that, would be prohibited or anything. So I think certainly down the line, I'd love to start my own business and grow it to be as successful as Darn Good Yarn, because what could be better than that?
Yeah. I always thought that one of the best ways to learn what it would be like to start your own business is to work in a small business.
Sure.
And get that exposure and sort of see, okay, this is what it's really like.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you do something that's new, you discover you don't like it.
Right.
And that's okay. That's part of the journey.
Certainly.
So that's great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to spend with me. It was a great perspective of a employee who joined a small startup.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Keri. So I thought that was a really nice interview with Keri. And one of the reasons I wanted to chat with her is to share with our listeners that this notion is you don't need to be a founder of a business to get the entrepreneurial experience. That being an employee in a small, growing entrepreneurial business is also a great way to kind of get your chops and get some skills in that area. Because many of the attributes you need as an employee are very similar. And if you listen to some of the things that Keri talked about, they were right along the notion of being an entrepreneur. What did you think, Mike?
Agreed. I love this idea of being entrepreneurial doesn't necessarily mean being the entrepreneur, but being part of this founding team. I think this is a great way to think about one's career path and think about the ideas of risk and think about the ideas of building a team and watching a product or a service grow. So I think that was really cool. I loved how she got the job. I loved her approach on the job. I loved what she discussed about culture. And I like the fact that she's thinking of starting her own business with the full support of Nichole and how that's just kind of built into the DNA.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the other interesting thing that I thought she said was it's okay to be uncomfortable, and that's a learned skill, that your ability to cope with the unknown or being in uncomfortable situations, ones where maybe you're not as confident as you want to be, is an important skill to have in a small growing business. And that's something that you can learn. I thought that was another great insight she had.
Yeah, I love it. I'll admit this to you, Bela, because you're my friend. But I'm a meditator. I do meditation, not hardcore anything. But one of the lessons that I learned from meditating and learning about meditation is that once you realize you have discomfort, or you're uncomfortable about something, and you can know and recognize, oh, I'm uncomfortable. And you can just by recognizing it, all of a sudden, it makes it a lot easier to deal with it. You know, that feeling you get in your stomach, or sometimes it's a headache or whatever. It's this feeling of discomfort. And just being able to recognize it, this idea of mindfulness, right? Of saying, this is discomfort I'm feeling, can go a long way. And then if you can get to the point that Keri was at, which is, hey, I'm uncomfortable and it's okay, it's good, right? Boy, then you're really, I think, setting yourself up for a much easier go at your job and in your life, whether it's at work or whether it's with your partner or with your family. I thought that was worth the price of admission as far as kind of nuggets of really cool advice from the Keri O'Brian chat.
Yes, I agree. And
was that too much information? Did I TMI you? Okay.
Well, you know, I was thinking there that I should give a plug for my favorite meditation podcast, which is 10% Happier with Dan Harris.
That's the one that I use.
Yeah, I started listening to that about a year ago, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, me too. I use the app and I subscribe and I meditate every day a little bit. So yeah, that's funny that we use the same one. You know, we're friends and we've never admitted this to each other, and now we're doing it in front of, you know, all whatever 7 of our listeners. No, I think it's more than that, but you know,
8 or 9. I think we're up to 8 or 9.
Yeah. Secret's out. Interesting. Yeah. The book is good too.
The other thing that she said that I thought was really good, Mike, and this has been a theme we've heard from other folks we've spoken to, and that is experience it firsthand. Don't study it over and over, but take that first step and then build on that experience. And that's how you really grow. So that was another sort of thing that she said, because we asked her, how did she learn some of these social media things? And she said, well, I learned them here. I just did it and I figured it out. And I thought that was cool. The other interesting thing that I thought was really good was she said, in a small company, you're the decision maker. You don't have to ask permission to do things. And lots of times in a large company, you know, there's all these toll gates you got to go through to be able to do anything. And in a small company, you got to run fast. And one of the ways you run fast is you decentralize decision making. And it's clearly that's something they do there at Darn Good Yarns.
Yeah, I love this. And this is, to me, when people, you know, ask me, okay, well, what did you like about being entrepreneur versus academic versus corporate? And the decision-making ability is the blessing and the curse, I think, of being an entrepreneur. Because it's like, absolutely, I love being able to make decisions quickly, whereas in academics, we don't. But it's also the curse because, you know what? When you screw up, you own it, right? It's all on you, and there's no backstop. But I think that those are both good things. And I think that is a prime difference between working in a big company or in the government or in academics and being an entrepreneur. And that ability to make those quick decisions and the decision criteria rests with you is a fantastically powerful feeling that you can really solve problems in a hurry. But it's scary too. But you could tell Keri was used to it and she thrived on it.
We're really happy that you joined us for our podcast adventure this week. And we hope you found the last hour or so thoughtful and interesting. We have 2 small requests. If you have a question about what we've discussed or suggestions about topics or guests, get in touch with us. Our email is bela.and.mike@gmail.com. Or if you like what we're doing, we'd love it if you hit the subscribe button on your podcast app. Or you know what? Even better, write a quick review for us. Or if you find others that you think would be interested in this, let them know and share it with them.
Well, that's it for this week from my mini recording studio here in Münster, Germany. Thanks for spending time with us. We look forward to you joining us for our next episode. Bela, thanks, and see you next week.
Sounds good, Mike. Have a great week. Signing off here from historic Schenectady, New York. This podcast is produced for Mike and I by our friends at Busy Media of Schenectady, New York. They can be found at busymedia.co.